Hey guys, today's video is all about new NARS products. I've got 3 face palettes here for you. I have the Summer Nights palette, the Hot Nights palette, and then I also have the Orgasm, Endless Orgasm palette, this guy right here. We're also going to be talking about the multi-use glosses. I have it in 3 shades. I hauled these in my last haul video, so we're going to be talking about these towards the end of the video. So I'm going to give you my thoughts on these palettes. I'm going to be applying the Summer Nights palette on my face for you guys today. And then I used the Hot Nights palette previously and I recorded it. So we're gonna be taking a look at some like extra footage of that. I'll talk you through what I did and what I think about this palette as well. And then we're going to be applying the Orgasm palette on top of the Summer Lights palette. Again, we'll talk about the glosses. And then what I wanna do is some comparison swatches of the Summer Lights palette to the Atomic Blonde palette. Many of you actually asked me to compare those 2 palettes. I also will show you a picture of it next to the Skin Deep palette, which is actually still available, and you'll see that there really isn't any comparable shades in there, but we'll get to that at the very end. And of course, I'll have timestamps down below in my description box if you want to jump around. So first, let's go ahead and dive into the Summer Lights palette. So here is the Summer Lights palette. I purchased it for $59 off of the Sephora site. It has 4 eyeshadows at the top, a highlighter, and a bronzer. And here's some swatches of those 6 products. So I swatched the 4 eyeshadows from left to right. And then next to that, I have the highlighter and then the bronzer. So these shades here are like a shimmery shade along with the highlight. The highlight is the most shimmery by far. And then these 2 products are like a matte. The formula of these powders are really creamy, and I find when that's the case, matte shadows in a creamy formula always end up looking like a demi-matte just because of the creaminess of it. It just doesn't ever look like a very flat matte. So that's the case with these 2 shadows here. I have used the Summer Lights palette twice already. This will be my 3rd time on camera. I really enjoy this palette. I think it is just such a great everyday palette. You guys know I'm a sucker for a basic neutral palette, and I just think this is so beautiful. And what I find really interesting is the mix of like cool, neutral, and warm tones in this palette. This one I would consider like a cool tone. This is on the cooler side. This to me is pretty neutral, and this is very warm. What I also find interesting is that this bronzer is very light. It works on my skin tone. It looks very natural. But this highlight, while I think it works for my skin tone, it is like just a hair shy of being too deep. So the combo of these 2 powders in here is very interesting. It happens to work for my skin tone, but I feel like it may not work if you go a little bit deeper or if you go a little bit more fair. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And I just watched Tara Baby's haul video, and she mentions how she thinks this highlight is too deep for her skin tone. She's fairer than I am and also has like a cooler undertone. So if you're closer to her skin tone, this is most likely going to be too dark for you. So I thought that was an interesting call to make on their part, but I really like the mix of like cool, neutral, warmer tones in here. I think it ends up working out really beautifully. So while these shadows are really soft and they're very creamy, I don't find them extra powdery. Like I said, I've already used this a couple of times. I've swatched it a bunch of times, and you can see like there's not a lot of like powder along the actual palette. I feel like with really powdery eyeshadow palettes, you kind of just see like the dust settle all over the palette. It starts to look really messy, and that's not the case here. So I don't find this palette to be especially powdery. But let's go ahead and start applying some of these things to my face. I've got my Sonia G Blender Pro brush, and I'm gonna go into this matte shade right here. Oh, I should mention that all the names are on the back of the palette. None of them look familiar to me, and I did like a quick check online to see if I could see if any of these existed in the like regular eyeshadow line, and I didn't see any dupes. But I should also mention that these eyeshadows feel very different from their regular like single or duo shadows. Since they reformulated those, they're much harder feeling. I don't think that they're too hard pressed. I feel like actually I pick up a lot of product and they're very pigmented, and those shadows work beautifully for me. But this seems like a very different formula to me. These seem like creamier and like softer in the pan versus those single shadows. So I suspect that none of these are duplicates from the regular line. So this palette, along with the other 2 palettes, are limited edition. All right, so back to applying the shadow. Again, I have the Blender Pro. I'm going into that matte shade, and I'm gonna start the outer corner here and just sweep it over in my socket line. I don't have any eye primer down or anything. I just have my concealer and a little bit of loose powder on top. And I find these shadows just really easy to use. They're pigmented, they blend out beautifully, as you can see. I'm going to use my Hakuhodo Eye 4 brush and go into this copper shade right next door. And I'm going to put this pretty much on the center of my lid here. Why am I only doing one eye? What is wrong with me? All right, now I'm going to take my Isom W21 brush. I'm going to go into this light shimmery shade. And I'm going to apply this onto the inner portion of my lid and blend it over that coppery shade. I should really refer to these shades as more of like a satin shade. I've been calling them shimmery. They don't have any kind of like tiny micro glitter in there to give it a shimmer. They're really more of just like a satin, like they almost have like a little bit of like a frosty sheen to them. I'm going to take my Isom G34 brush, and I like to run this brush over the edges of my shadow. It really just does such a good job kind of blowing everything out. It's a fairly large blending brush, and it just really kind of softens all the edges. I'm going to take my Sonia G Builder Pro brush and go into this shade at the end, and I'm going to just add this to the outer corner here just to add a little bit of dimension. All right, so that's all 4 eyeshadows applied. I'm going to go ahead and finish up my eyeshadow, you know, add a little bit of liner and mascara. And I don't really know why I did my eyes before the bronzer and the highlight. I usually do bronzer first, but that's okay. We're changing it up today. So I'm going to do that, and I'll be right back for the bronzer and the highlight application. All right, I am back to apply the bronzer and highlight. So I'm going to go in with my Tom Ford bronzer brush and go into the bronzer. Oh, I just want to show you the palette after I've, you know, poked in there and everything and used some of the products. See how it's just not that powdery? I mean, there's a little bit of powder kick up, but really it's not bad at all. So I just wanted to show you guys that. So here is the bronzer applied. I think it looks decent on my skin tone. I feel like it has a little bit of like a warmish, little bit of an orange kind of undertone, and I don't really mind that so long as it doesn't go overboard. But I don't mind like a little bit of an orange in my bronzer, especially in the warmer months, in the summer months. So that is the bronzer on my skin. And the formula, just like the eyeshadows, it's very creamy, and it's really, really easy to blend out, and I think it looks really nice on the skin. Next, let's take a look at this highlighter. So this highlighter, I think I mentioned already that it looks okay on my skin, but it is just like almost too dark for my skin tone. But I love the metallic quality of it. It's pretty blinding. So I'm going in with the Sonia G Sculpt 2 brush, and I'm going to go into the highlight, and we're going to just apply some here. Whoa, what is going on with my eyebrow? So there is the highlight on my cheek. It's really, really wet looking. There aren't any like glitters in there at all. It's just a very smooth looking highlight. I'm going to apply some of this highlight to the inner corners of my eyes and right underneath my eyebrow. All right, so there is the Summer Lights palette applied to my face. Let's move over to the Hot Nights palette. So here is a close-up of the palette. And again, we have 4 eyeshadows on the top, and then we have a highlighter and a bronzer. So here's some swatches of the Hot Nights palette. So again, I've got all 4 eyeshadows from left to right, and then I have the highlight and the bronzer. All 4 of these shadows have that kind of satin frosty finish to them. The highlight obviously has a satin kind of finish to it. And then the bronzer in here is that kind of demi matte finish, just like in the Summer Lights palette. This palette to me is such the perfect complement to the Summer Lights palette. I really feel like this is a daytime palette and this is a nighttime palette. These 2 shades at the end just end up making this look so much more dramatic. It makes it look a little bit more disco, like you're going out. It's such a pretty color story, I think. And again, they play a bit with like warm and cool tones, although I feel like this palette is predominantly like neutral, maybe cool leaning. The highlight is definitely a little bit cooler. I find this actually to be lighter than the one in the Summer Lights palette. This bronzer is the teensiest bit deeper than the Summer Lights palette. So here's some footage of me actually applying this Hot Nights palette. So first I put on the bronzer, and this bronzer is probably maybe just a couple hairs deeper than the one in the Summer Lights palette. So I think both of the bronzers in these two palettes actually work on my skin tone. And then next we have the highlight, and this highlight is a little bit lighter. It's a little bit like a teensy bit cooler in tone. It's a little bit less golden than the one in the Summer Lights, but it has the same reflective quality. It looks really like smooth and wet on the skin. There are no little shimmers or glitters in there at all. It just is a very frosty kind of sheen, which I love. And then here's me applying the eyeshadows. So I start with this shade right here. So I do what I normally do. I start on the outer corner of my eye, and I just start to kind of sweep it towards the center of my lid, and I bring it kind of through that socket line area. And then I jump over to this, I don't know, pinky red shade, and I add that pretty much on top, but I centered it a little bit more, again, just to add a little bit of dimension. And automatically it gave me a lot of drama. I felt like this red shade is really, really something else. It's bright, it's really pigmented, and I feel like if you wanted to do like a smoky, like a red smoky eye, this would actually be really cool, just sort of all over the lid and kind of like blown out. Be really pretty. And then I went into the lightest shade here, and I added that to the inner portion of my lid, brought it over towards the center. And then I just added a little bit more depth with this dark kind of eggplant shade at the end, and just put that on the outer corner just a little bit, concentrated it. This shade is very, very pigmented. It's one of those shades that I finger swatched on my arm, and it didn't just wipe off with like a makeup removing wipe. I had to really go at it, and then there was still like a faint bit of it left. Like it finally came off in the shower, but it did not remove easily. So be careful with this shade. It's very, very pigmented. And then I just kind of lined the outer third of my lower lash line with this dark shade as well. So these two palettes, I really, really love. I wasn't even going to purchase these, and then so many of you asked me on like Instagram and here on YouTube, are you going to get these? Please review these palettes. I just thought to myself, well, they kind of just don't look that special to me. But after using both of these palettes now several times, I think they really are special, actually. I love the formula. I think they're really, really easy to work with. They're very, very creamy without being like overly soft or crumbly in any way, and they just blend like a dream. And like I mentioned, I find the color stories to be very interesting, but just in a very nuanced way, because when I looked at this at first, I was like, okay, another neutral palette. Not that I'm opposed to that. I love a neutral palette, but I have just purchased like so many, like the Chanel one, very neutral, very beautiful. The Natasha Denona Biba palette, beautiful. This one though really does a nice kind of like dance between neutral and cool and warm tones in here. I just think it's really pretty. And this one as well, I thought, oh, I'm never gonna really use these shades, but they're really beautiful. And I like the fact that these, and in the Summer Lights palette, but I like the fact that these are like a satin. They have a beautiful, like smooth kind of frosty finish, but there isn't anything like overly glittery. I didn't experience any fallout with these shadows. I guess I just appreciate how they kind of just simplified the formula options in here for you. Like this is all you have, but they really kind of played around with the tones. I don't know. I just find these palettes to be really special, and these are definitely going to be showing up in my VIB recommendations. And I love a good face palette. I love a face palette where you can use all of the shades in there. And fortunately for me, I can. So those are my thoughts on those two palettes. Let's move on to the Orgasm palette. So I try not to watch other people's reviews on things that I haven't even played with yet. I just don't want it to taint my experience with it. So I saw Mel Thompson had posted a video, and I was like, oh, I can't wait to watch that, but I need to play with this first. And then I was watching one of Tara Baby's haul videos. She started to talk about it, and I like fast forwarded. But I started playing with these. I enjoy them a lot. I don't like the finish of a couple of them, but we'll get to that. And then I went back and watched Mel's video and that section of Tara Baby's video, and I thought, oh my gosh, they both had issues with the application. And I thought, I didn't really have any issues. I will say that these are not very pigmented. What these will give you is like just like an effect on your cheek. I don't think that you're going to get the pigmentation that you think you're gonna get by looking at the pans in here. But before I go on, here is a close-up of the palette. It's got that really interesting bubble top. It's pretty weighty. I think this is a very, very cool looking design, but it just like makes this palette twice as thick, and that I definitely do not appreciate. We have a nice mirror on the inside, and then here is a close-up of the 6 products. Now let me go ahead and give you some swatches. I basically went across the top row from left to right and then the bottom row from left to right. These all have names on the back. I will read them off just because it's so ridiculous. So the first one is Orgasm Ecstasy, then Deep Orgasm, then Super Orgasm, Double Orgasm, Orgasm Fever, and then Orgasm. This Orgasm is not, it's not really similar to the original Orgasm blush at all. It's not quite as like punchy, peachy bright as the Orgasm is. This is a much kind of like dulled down version of Orgasm. These are all cream products, which surprised me. When I hauled this for you guys, I discovered it while I was filming because I thought these were all powder products, but these are all cream products. And I'm going to be comparing this to the Natasha Denona Bloom palette at the end of the video when I do all of my comparison swatches. A lot of you requested that as well. And so I'm going to apply a few of these products for you. I do not like this one, which is Double Orgasm. This one has, as you probably saw in the swatches, it has a lot of micro glitters in there. And it's too much. It's, I just don't like it. It's too glittery. I don't mind when there's like a little bit, but it's kind of like a glitter bomb, and I'm not a fan of that. This one also has micro glitters in there, but it's not as much as that one. And this one is the Orgasm Fever. This just has fewer than this one. The rest are all just like a metallic sheen. Of course, there's like little shimmers in there, but nothing quite as obvious as this one. So I'm gonna go ahead and apply Orgasm onto my cheeks, and I'm gonna show you how I apply it with my finger. And we'll see together. Again, I've used this palette twice now in 2 different ways. I've been like really playing around with this palette, especially after watching Mel and Tara's videos. I was really curious about all the different ways that I could apply it. So I applied it over just straight up foundation. I applied it over foundation that I powdered. And then yesterday I applied it over foundation powder and some makeup. And that's basically what we're doing today. And I didn't experience what they experienced. I didn't experience it kind of moving or lifting any of my foundation underneath or any of my products underneath. You know, everyone's experience is going to be different. None of us use exactly the same products. None of us have exactly the same skin. But I do wonder if maybe it has something to do with the primer. So everything is kind of sitting on top of the primer. And maybe if you have like kind of like a slippy silicone-y primer down, and then you have all the stuff on top of it, that if you're using a product like this one, which maybe like will pull that product, that it will most likely shift if it's sitting on top of something a little bit more smooth. So today what I did was I put down my Chantecaille Ultra Sun Primer. That is a very kind of smooth, kind of slick silicone primer, and I've never tried it with that as a primer down. I've been using other primers that are more moisturizing, so we'll see what happens. So I have some of the Orgasm on my finger here, and what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna tap it over my cheek. And I'm just pressing and tapping. I'm not, you know, swiping in any way. And see how it just gives like an effect to my cheek? There's very little pigment, actual pigment. And when you look at this in the pan, you think you're gonna get like a really nice kind of like peachy blush. I don't think that's the case. I feel like this is a palette of like blush toppers or cheek toppers. So I'm taking a super close look at this and making sure that I don't see anything funky going on. I've also been using all different kinds of foundations testing this out, and today I have the Chanel Le Beige Water Fresh Tint. This is the most watery foundation I have tried. I thought maybe like water wouldn't mix well with it. I tried it with my Sisley Le Tint. I tried it with the Tom Ford, the Cushion Compact that I have. In all of those cases, I didn't find that it moved the product underneath. And I don't see it moving it. So I am not experiencing what they experienced and what I think some other people have experienced as well. I'm actually having pretty good luck with this. Let me go ahead and apply some to the other side here. So my preference, after playing around with a few different applicators, my preference is to use my finger. When I use a brush, and I've been using the Tom Ford number 6 brush, I find, because these are such like bright, shimmery, glowy kind of products, I find that I just put like way too much down on my face, and I'll just stipple. I'll just kind of like pounce the brush on my skin. I won't swipe in any way, but I feel like the application just isn't as precise as I like it to be with products that are so highlighty. So I've been liking using my finger. But I do also want to demo with a brush so you guys can see. I am going to use this pinkier one. This is Super Orgasm, and I'm going to put this kind of further back on my cheek here. And I'm going to use that Tom Ford number 6 brush. This one is a little deeper in tone, so it's going to be a little bit more obvious on my skin tone, but still just, it's just not a lot. It's not a ton. So I've just been kind of pressing and pouncing. So there is the Super Orgasm. And again, I'm just taking a super close look. I don't really see that it moved anything underneath. So again, as usual, makeup mysteries continue. I really don't know why it would work for me and not for so many others, but I'm actually kind of enjoying the like slight and subtle effect that it gives like my cheeks. They're really nice blush toppers, like I mentioned. So I've been enjoying this, what is the name? Endless Orgasm palette. All right, let's go ahead and jump to these multi-use glosses. So I've been using these a lot because these are glosses that you can not only use on your lips, but you're supposed to be able to use on your face and on your eyes. I have probably used all three in all three different areas a couple of times. And I will say that I do not like it on my face. They don't set down, it's a gloss, but it doesn't really move. And I actually found that it didn't really disintegrate any of my makeup underneath, which I thought was really nice. The texture is very smooth. They go on really beautifully, but because it doesn't set down really at all, it just kind of dries a little bit, but it stays kind of, not tack, it just kind of stays kind of like oily. There's actually no tack to these. It just stays kind of emollient. And so my hair would get caught in it, or if I'm on the phone, like I could, it just got messy and I didn't really like it on my face. On my eyes, it's okay. Again, I was surprised that it didn't deteriorate any products underneath my eyes. Like if I had like a powder eyeshadow or whatever, and I just tapped it on top, you know, it was okay. I feel like I have glittery eyeshadows that pretty much give me the same effect, and I would much rather use that than this, because again, you run the risk of it ending up being kind of messy. But if you're into an eye gloss, these were not bad. They didn't migrate, and I felt like if you used just a little bit and you tapped it on with your fingers, it didn't really like eat away at the product underneath. So I thought that was pretty cool. And in terms of lip gloss, these are really the only way I like using this product. So here is what these glosses look like. And then inside what you have is like a spatula applicator. And that of course makes it easier to apply to your face and your eyes, but not your lips. It's actually a little bit weird on your lips. So these are really beautiful lip toppers. So I'm gonna go ahead and apply these and give you some lip swatches. They're very, very sheer, so I don't even know how much of it you'll be able to see over the camera. I'm gonna lay it on pretty thick. So there is Star Babe. Why do I keep forgetting the name? Star Babe. And there's some little micro glitters in there, but it's not gritty at all. This formula is actually really nice. Zero tack whatsoever. It's just very, very glossy. Next we have Relentless, and this has more of a pink base. So there is Relentless. I feel like my lips look just a little bit cooler in tone. And again, this has like those little micro glitters in there, but you don't feel them at all. Not gritty at all. And then last but not least, I have Working Girl here. This has like a really pretty gold appearance in the tube. There is Working Girl. So those are the multi-use glosses. I like them, but I feel like when a product tries to be too many things, to too many parts of your face, it ends up just kind of falling short on all parts. Like, I wish they had just made these like lip toppers, or just like focused it and made it like an eye gloss. So I don't know if I would actually recommend these to you unless you really like kind of just playing around with your makeup. If you really like, you know, adding a little bit here and there, you don't mind the texture, maybe a little bit sticky on the face, or like a little eye gloss here and there. I think these are great fun. So let me know your thoughts down below in the comments section. I'm really curious if you got this palette, what your experience was, if you've played around with it, maybe it worked successfully for you one way, not successfully for you in another way. I'm just really curious because I always find it very interesting when it works out well for some people and it just totally doesn't work for someone else. I'm always just really curious. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Subscribe down below. I would love that. And I'll see you in my next video.